How did the Adepta Sororitas get here? This video covers the ups and downs of being a Battle Sister player who began with this awesome faction when they were released in the 90s, all the way through to the start of 11th edition of Warhammer 40,000. For the longest time, the Sisters of Battle, or Adepta Sororitas as they're now known, were the neglected child. They came out really strong in 1997 with the Sisters of Battle Codex, and although they had a very small roster, they really captured people's imagination. Women in sci-fi and fantasy were often depicted in stripped down armor, bikini and shorts with a pouch strapped on so there was somewhere to hold their ammo, or tiny knife. Something to put on the front of a novel to give teenagers an urge to buy the book. The Sisters of Battle gave you boobs to paint and look at, but respectfully contained within power armor. Battle Sisters were fully armored, aside from their heads which showed shouting faces as their faith carried them through. Power armor, not scraps of cloth. Very different from how many other warrior women were portrayed. Don't look at the Repentia, not even respectfully. They are in disgrace. And they weren't out in the 90s. The Battle Sister models were so popular upon launch that Games Workshop tried to add them to Warhammer Fantasy, in a way, and that is why Mordheim has Sisters of Sigmar as one of their core 6 factions. Then came the darker times. Things got a lot more grimdark in the background of 40k, and the Sisters continued with their small range of models. Metal Battle Sisters, Seraphim, a Space Marine Rhino, a Space Marine Rhino with a big flamer called an Immolator, and a couple of characters. Plus some secret models, which I explored in another video. And aside from the vehicles, all metal. This was not unusual, but this was all we had. Other factions received newer units, the Sisters did not. Their army book, the Sisters of Battle Codex, was one of the last ones to come out in 2nd edition, and when 3rd edition came around, the Codex was invalidated very quickly because 3rd edition was a massive departure in rules from 2nd edition. Even more so than like 7th edition to 8th edition for newer players to compare to. The Sisters were sidelined. They were part of the Inquisition, but not their own army. You do not grow a faction by invalidating their book and making them part of another faction. See more recently Games Workshop moving Deathwatch into Imperial Agents and invalidating their Space Marine rules. This has since been reversed. Or they used to be Codex Assassins, but now they are some units in the Imperial Agents Codex, not a force in themselves. And so you get a self-fulfilling prophecy. No one likes Sisters anymore, thinks Games Workshop. They don't sell, so they don't bother making rules for them and don't risk making models that won't sell. So no one is buying new Sisters. So Games Workshop thinks no one likes Sisters anymore, because they don't sell, so they don't bother making rules for them, and you see how it goes. There is far less support for the Sisters than any other faction in early 3rd edition that still continued as a faction. Genestealer Cult blipped out of existence as far as rules were concerned, and so did the Squats. Like I say, very big change between 2nd edition and 3rd edition. So Games Workshop would maybe re-release a box of 10 Metal Sisters as a squad you could buy online, once online became a thing, otherwise it was mail order, but there was nothing new for them. So for myself, my little collection of Sisters did expand in 3rd edition, but it was so much easier to get more Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines because they had plastic kits. If you are new to 40k and like the Adepta Sororitas for their beautiful artwork and regular mentions in the lore, for many editions, the Sisters were as often mentioned as the Harlequins, the Ynnari, or the Kroot. You have heard of them, but they might appear in the lore as part of listed participants in a major war, like in the 13th Black Crusade, and often on the list of losses. The Sisters became a marker of other factions' strength. You want to show that your new Orc models are tough? You show them killing Sisters. Want to give those same Orcs a big victory on Armageddon? Well, they slaughtered the Order of Our Martyred Lady so badly that the Sisters changed their robes from black in the old artwork to red in recognition of the massive amount of martyrs. Sisters were harder than Guardsmen, but not as strong as Space Marines. You can't show your new Tau unit blowing up Space Marines, they're the best warriors in the galaxy. But no one would care if you say they can kill Guardsmen. so can everyone. So you have them kill sisters, the benchmark in killability. This culminated in the infamous Blood Tide event, where the Grey Knights wanted to be extra pure in a coming fight against the demons, so they slaughtered the Battle Sisters who were holding out in the Basilica of St. Miriel on the Imperial world of Van Horn, and they covered themselves in their blessed blood to ward away the demons, as if their own armor was not already doing a better job. I has a hat is canon. I explained this and the lore of this time for the sisters in another video linked up above and also down below. This was later retconned many years later as off-screen martyrdom, but this is what sisters players had to put up with for nearly 20 years. Oh good, some artwork with my faction represented. Well, that's a nice fleur-de-lis tattoo on a severed head being swung around by a happy demon. Oh cool, some sisters getting dragged away by demon tentacles. Oh look, a sister being eaten by a giant tentacle mouth and it's swallowing her whole. Demons and sisters were unfortunately paired up a lot. It wasn't all bad. The Witch Hunters Codex from 2003-2004 is probably one of the best codex books ever created. It expanded the roster of the sisters while still using the metal models. Dominions are sisters with more special weapons than average. Retributors are sisters with more heavy weapons. Celestians use the same weapons as Battle Sisters, but better. These are Celestians with guns. So from a basic troop, we got a fast attack unit, a heavy support unit, and an elite unit. Same as how the Grey Knights currently have 4 types of warriors from the one box. You got your basic troop strike squad, you've got your teleporting fast attack squad, you've got your heavy weapons support squad, and you've got elite type. The Witch Hunters Codex also introduced the world to the Exorcist, the best tank ever. A church organ is drastically improved by putting it on tank tracks and letting it fire missiles. So I was able to expand my sister roster, especially with that beautiful metal Exorcist. And the sisters had more troops options. As part of the Witch Hunters, they could also have Inquisitorial Stormtroopers, a unit that's unfortunately gone away and isn't available to the Inquisition anymore. We also had Inquisitors, Archoflagellants, and the Assassins were in this book. So think of it as Imperial Agents and Adepta Sororitas together. But also note that, like Imperial Agents in 10th and 11th edition, the idea was you added the sisters to other armies as allies. But as the best book ever, the Witch Hunters Codex gave you another faction roster, the adversaries of the Witch Hunters. From one book you got 2 factions, and the adversaries of the Witch Hunters you should basically think of as the Lost and the Damned, the human side of the Chaos Space Marines, like mutants, like traitors. This codex was the last real codex we would have through 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition, and then we got a new compatibility codex across 2 White Dwarf issues. In 6th edition, the Adepta Sororitas had their own codex as digital rules only with no codex sold in store. And these were not free digital rules either. You had to pay for an EPUB. Games Workshop stopped doing PDFs around this time because they realized that people on the internet would share a PDF. EPUBs were a bit harder. There were really no new units. You just kept playing with your existing sisters and recognized that your power level was going to be below everyone else's. We had a Saint Celestine model released, but that was as part of a bundle of characters and they could be used by any Imperial faction. Sisters of Battle were the least supported faction that still existed. There was no great reason to play such an unloved faction. It's like trying to convince you to play Imperial Agents. But the Adepta Sororitas were really cool. It's warrior nuns. They have the same armor save and weapons as Space Marines, but lower toughness. The Exorcist was awesome. But aside from the sister on the turret of the newer Immolator, there were no plastic sisters, which made it a really hard army to collect, especially when the sisters would only be available through Games Workshop occasionally. So you mostly had to collect them through eBay, a couple of models at a time, and then strip the paint off, hope they had backpacks included, buy the backpack separately, glue the models together, which was thankfully just the backpack, and the metal sister, and then you could very, very slowly expand your collection. So in a way, it was much harder than collecting Imperial Agents is now. And now that I've covered why you should absolutely not play Sisters of Battle through this time, why you really, really should play one of the best factions in Warhammer 40,000. They returned in 8th edition, partly as an index, where they were bundled in with other Imperial factions, the not Space Marine Imperium factions. Then they later had a codex, as Games Workshop was outright told by fans that we wanted more sisters. They did a big community survey, and the overall response was plastic battle sisters. It was one of the ongoing memes for the previous 20 years, along with bring back squats. So in a rush, Games Workshop delivered, less than a year between that survey being completed and the sisters being released. It would be absolutely fine for anyone to get their hands on plastic battle sisters that were released in February 2020. As long as nothing stopped people going into stores and buying the sisters, their place as a beloved and well-played faction was assured.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
So about a week later, Britain went into lockdown, as did much of the world, and hype for new models you might buy and play with dropped somewhat because people couldn't meet up and play. And so people painted up their current models rather than buying more. So in between lockdowns, I was able to go into a Games Workshop store and buy some new plastic Seraphim, new plastic Battle Sisters, / Dominions, / Celestians with guns as they were at the time. But the sisters have mostly not been neglected. If you compare them to Space Marines, they're massively neglected. But otherwise, they have been kept included in release schedules. They got a codex in 9th edition and in 10th edition. In 10th edition, the only model that had a core release was the Canoness with Jump Pack, a model you could make yourself by combining a Canoness with a Jump Pack, or a Zephyrim with the weapons you wanted for the Canoness. 9th edition expanded the range, but took it in a weird direction. Not Terminator walkers that are utterly horrible to put together, a battle tank that is top half Leman Russ, bottom half Space Marine Predator, and Celestians with combat weapons and shields. Then removing the Celestians with guns when we entered 10th edition, something for which I have never forgiven them. In 11th edition, there's new kill teams, which unfortunately is a not great way to release new models for the faction, because if you're buying them right away, they come with all the kill team stuff, and kill team players want that. It should be left for the kill team players. Then they're released separately, but still with kill team stuff, and it's an inflated price, beyond the inflation of Games Workshop already. If you ever do want to buy any sister models, I do have affiliates linked in the description where you can get them far cheaper than going through Games Workshop, and it's much easier than trolling eBay for individual units that you want that might be painted, or that you'd have to strip down, or may have pieces missing. In the newer editions, the army rule of Sacred Rights has been replaced. Sacred Rights let you do cool things if you passed a leadership test, or in the case of the Witch Hunter's Codex, if you rolled above or under the number of models in the unit. It depended on what you wanted to do, which ability you wanted to use. The army rule was changed to be Acts of Faith, but it was the same thing as Sacred Rights. Nothing to do with Miracle Dice. I liked that more than Miracle Dice. You cheat a roll with Miracle Dice by substituting in a pre-rolled dice, and a shot is guaranteed to hit or a saving throw will be passed. Perhaps a 6+ invulnerable save the sisters have kept up across the editions. But this dice mechanic is the same one that the Chaos Demons of Tzeentch and the Duplicitous Eldar have used in the past. So I would like to go back to some variation of Sacred Rights in 11th edition. We have had that as our army rule for far longer, only changing to Miracle Dice near the end of 8th edition. The 10th edition codex for the Adepta Sororitas was strong. The first time the Adepta Sororitas had really been a strong faction to play, but that strength was short-lived. And some would say we haven't fully recovered from the massive nerf to the rules that we got in December 2024, giving us fewer Miracle Dice to use, and at the time making the newly given Champions of Faith attachment very hard to use. In the initial release of the Champions of Faith, you discarded Miracle Dice to get a bonus. Well, Miracle Dice were on a budget that couldn't really stretch to spending more to activate a detachment rule. This has been fixed in a patch a few months later, so now the detachment rule is free. And the Bringers of Flame detachment was made much worse, much worse, than its near identical Space Marine variant, especially in the range at which you get to use the detachment rule, which remains 12 inches for the Space Marines but 6 inches for the Sisters. The Bringers of Flame detachment rule has not been changed again and remains in this state going into 11th edition. So at the moment, the Adepta Sororitas have one of the lowest player rates in the game. Man, I would hate to be someone who wanted to make a living giving advice on the Genestealer cult, Imperial Agents, Death Watch, and Sisters. Not a lot of people willing to watch. No, wait, that sounds really cool. I'm gonna keep doing it. And you should absolutely feel free to send me money through the Ko-fi link in the description that will help me continue to do it. And one of the tiers will also give you one-on-one help, so if you wanted to make an army list, I can help you out, regardless of the detachment, the way you want to play, or your collection. We can make working army lists together with good tactics. So as we go into 11th edition, how are the Adepta Sororitas treated? How are we doing in 11th edition of 40k? As Acts of Faith are still our army rule, a lot of the gameplay is based around those kinds of shenanigans. We are still toughness 3, and that means pretty much everything in the game can kill us rather easily. I am going to cover that in another video. I was going to do it all in one, a continuous journey from 2nd edition through to where we are in 11th edition, but that video will look far more at the minor rules changes and how it feels to play Sisters in the newest edition. This has been the emotional journey of what it was like to play the Adepta Sororitas. Having a great book, then not being playable, then having Codex Witch Hunters, which was awesome, then only having Codex Witch Hunters for many years, being only mildly supported with rules in a White Dwarf and with digital releases, all the while being the punching bag for every other faction in 40k. Then the glorious re-release in 8th edition, with Sisters continuing strongly in the game, though taking a backseat compared to many other factions. I hope that in the future we will only get even better and be even more cool and have more people join us so everyone can have a great day of 40k.